Hello, my name is Peter James Hegarty, and I was born at Cherbourg on the 1st of December 1943. I served in the army for 6 years, and my units were 7th Field Squadron firstly after my recruit training, and then I was posted to Vietnam, and I served over there for approximately 9 months, 9 to 10 months, and that was with 1 Field Squadron, Royal Australian Engineers, and then came back to Australia and back to 7th Field Squadron for a while, then served in Malaya at Malaya and Singapore, and I did 2 years service over there. Now, whilst I was in Vietnam, I was with an engineer squadron, and our main role was to delouse booby traps, set mines, and search tunnels and stuff like that. I was instrumental in laying what they call a minefield at the Horseshoe part of a certain area that is called the Horseshoe, and we laid mines there for about a kilometre around a particular village. We lost a number of members there because of the anti-lifting devices that they used in the mines at the time, and it was very delicate operations laying these mines, and you had to be very careful. And I also went out on operations throughout that area in Nui Dat, and spent that, as I said, 10 months there in Vietnam. So, yeah, I was seen active service there for that particular time, and then came back home to Australia. I suppose I should reflect on why I joined the army and things like that, and I sort of got ahead of myself there a bit. But I actually joined the army because a couple of my best mates, Glenn and Erwin Brown, who were twin brothers, had joined up before me, and we all came from Cherbourg here, and we served all. The funny part about it was the fact that the three of us were all posted to an engineer unit. One was at Inogra, and the other fellow was over in Perth, Western Australia. But the twin brothers and I, we were all engineers, and Glenn ended up a sergeant. Erwin ended up a corporal plant operator, and I ended up a corporal pay rep, and I did a clerk's course. So I actually went in the army to better myself, and whilst I seen active service, I did courses on my return back to Australia at the School of Military Engineering, and spent a number of years down there doing courses to upgrade my skills, and so that I can ensure that after I left the army, I had some transferable job skills that could be applicable out in Civvy Street. Did my initial training at Kapuka, which is at Wagga Wagga, and that was the basic course, basic training. Then I was posted to engineers. I got engineers after you being psyched and all that sort of stuff. They decided to send me to engineers, and that I went to the School of Military Engineering at Liverpool, Al Casula, and that was I spent 12 months. Oh, well, actually 12 months there doing training. But during that 12 months, there was a period that we because of at that time the national service was in place, and we couldn't. We had to wait on courses to be initiated, and you had to fall in line. So 6 months, and there was another 6 months course, and then you were transferred out to your unit, and that was back up to Inogra, and that was 7th Field. Whilst I'm proud of my army life, I'm still a traditional owner, which I'm very proud of. And what happened with our family was that my granddad and my grandmother were sent from their traditional land up in North Queensland back down here to Cherbourg. My granddad was a Wulgarugaba man, and my grandmother was a Juru woman. Now, Wulgarugaba is more or less Townsville, the Townsville region, Magnetic Island, those places that's where our traditional land is there for my grandfather's side. And his name was Peter too, I was named after him. And my grandmother, who's Jenny Hegarty, and she was married twice. That's why we've got two lots of families up in North Queensland. We got the Ross and Hegarty families. And my grandmother is from, as I said, from the Burdekin area, and she's a Juru woman, and that encompasses Ayr and right down to Bowen. We actually now have got native title in that particular area on my grandmother's side. So we still relate back there. But funny thing about this, we always knew that we had family up there. We were told that, and that was part of our history. And that history was enforced upon us by our grandmother and so not so much my grandmother, but my grandfather. My grandmother passed before, I became in my teenage years. But we always related back to that particular traditional lands. And funny thing, after my discharge, my first job was posted to Townsville. I got my first government job in the Department of Aboriginal and Islander Affairs as a welfare liaison officer, and that was back in Townsville. And I was able to work with my family that was left behind, and so that was re-established as a kinship. And later in life, my dad, who now retired from the Queensland Railways, used to come back, and he made. He initiated contact with all our nephews and nieces up there in Townsville, which on our family that we left behind, which was great. And but the army, because the only reason that I was able to re-establish all that friendship, not friendship, but my family kinship, was because of my army training. And the training that I did whilst in the army, I enjoyed the army. I loved it, and made good friendship, lifelong friendships. They're still established today. I met a mate when we were going to school at military engineering there. We're like brothers. We're ring each other up. We make contact, and it's 50 years. Since that friendship has been established. But it was at the School of Military Engineering, and the mateship and kinship that you make within the Army is great. I recommend the Army for any young person to sort of take up that offer and see what I've seen. I spent 3 years overseas. I'm a blackfellow from Cherbourg, and living overseas is just a different type of lifestyle. You learn to cope and learn to establish friendships or knowledge of the country that you might be serving in, like things like that. I found out I was going to Vietnam when I was sent to Canungra. And Canungra is a jungle training centre outside of, just up in the hinterlands of the north, what do we call it, the Gold Coast. It's up in the ranges up there, and it's intensive training in training, and it's more or less infantry-based training, where you're not allowed. You spend 6 weeks there, and you don't never walk anywhere at Canungra. You got to run, and for 6 weeks you run. The only time that you were it was acceptable that you didn't have to run or trot or whatever was when you were going for a meal, and if you were going to the mess. So I spent 6 weeks there. Then I found out that I was going to Vietnam after that. But yes, we did a lot of training beforehand. Was training at Shellwater Bay up at Rockhampton, where I think I was on the first Barrow Winger 1, what they called. That was a big exercise. Involved, I think it involved the American soldiers as well. They were there somewhere along the lines, and we built the airfields, the water supply, and the roads. And up at Shellwater Bay there for that Barrowinga One, they called it, that big exercise, which is for about 3 months up there. That was my training before I went to Vietnam as well. My dad my mum had passed by before I went in the army, but my dad he was fine. You make your bed, you lie in it. That was his attitude. You want to go in the army, you serve in the army and do the best you can. My brothers were fine with it as well, but my sisters were a little bit hesitant, apprehensive. A lot of tears were spent, crying. But when I came home, they were all, my father and my elder sister was out the airport to meet me, which was great, when I came home from Vietnam. And but yeah, we've had family reunions and things like that after that, and but they never pressured me to find out what I did. They just let me be and just get on with life and things like that. But they was there for my support when I got back, and that was the main thing. When I got back from Vietnam, I was really proud to see my father at the airport and my elder sister. I was really, really proud. You're sort of brought up to speed because you do what would they call it? I can't remember the exact word, but they give you a 3 months induction training at the School of Military Engineering, where you're actually going across with. They show you films and stuff like that, and you know exactly what's in store, but you don't know exactly until you experience it firsthand. And so you're sort of made alerted to the fact that you're going into a war zone, and it's just not. You got to be on your toes, be alert, and don't take things at face value. They sort of really handled us into us before we went, and you sort of I was apprehensive, but when you land there, the first thing hits you is the smell, the atmosphere, the heat, and you never lived in that sort of tropics before. Whilst Queensland's pretty hot. It's a different type of heat, and then that sort of make you aware that you are now in a war zone in a strange country, and you just you're apprehensive. That's how I looked at it. We had a good trip. We went in by Pan Am, and we stopped the night in the Philippines overnight, and the next day we were in Saigon, and then that was by the Pan Am all the way to Saigon, and then when we got to Saigon, it was with the old Caribou up to Nui Dat, from Saigon to Nui Dat. And then that one, it really hit me. We had to wear civvies, by the way, when we travelled on Pan Am too. So then when we left Philippines, we were in uniform. Then we put our uniforms on, and we travelled to Saigon. Very seldom had days off, but I remember that. But our daily tasks were. Making sure that the bunkers were cleaned, our rifles were serviced on a daily basis. They were cleaned. Your stand to, stand down sort of thing in the morning and the afternoon. You had sort of reveille, like that's American slang, but you had to be on certain times for you on parade in the morning first thing. And then you more or less, sometimes there was gunfire on the edges of the boundaries, and you had to stand to and all that sort of stuff, and hit the trenches and be prepared for, for an invasion or sort of thing like that, but never sort of occurred. But those sort of things, you had to be prepared for, and you had to have all your equipment ready and at hand, so you could grab it in a few seconds and be ready to stand to, as they called it. Daily chores, well, around there, I don't know. Army, like, it changes. Like you had different duties. You were given duties like even cleaning the toilets and stuff like that, and even that happened in Vietnam, where you're given daily chores to do. I ended up in the canteen, given the job behind the canteen to serve behind the bar one stage, and I loved that because I thought I was the kingpin then around there, and they knew. Everyone kowtowed to me, and they had to be polite and everything like that because I was in charge of the bar, and so things like that. We did have time off, and we'd go down to Vung Tau, and we'd meet up with our sister battalion, which was 17 construction, and we'd go to the Peter Hegarty Club. And there was an American club there too, and I can't remember. I was asking one of the ex-army guys that I play golf with, what was the name of that American PX that we used to go to. But anyhow, it was at Vung Tau, and we'd also play rugby union down there. We got into trouble, really, really bad trouble there, coming home from Vung Tau in the back of a truck, and we just finished a game of rugby union against 17 Construction Squadron. And we're having a few beers on the back of the truck, and we're traveling, through enemy territory. And truck pulled up for us to go to the toilet, and a few words was, and a fight erupted between one of the couple of blokes who were on the football team. And when we got back, we were all told to go to our lines and not to come out of there until we fronted the squadron sergeant major, the squadron officer in charge, and he gave us, we were confined to our tents for 24 hours. We weren't allowed to go up to the canteen because it was of this fight that broke out on the back of the truck after a game of rugby union. But that's, you're in a war zone and you have to fight amongst yourselves over that. The army lulls you into a sense of belonging where you don't even know that you're an Aboriginal, and it doesn't matter. You're black or white or brindle, and as long as you can get on in the army, you're fine. And it lulled me into a lot of senses. I've got to tell a funny story, but it's back in Australia after I came back from Vietnam, and it was at Inogra, and it was a payday, and I was coming from the orderly room, and I raced across, which is a no-no. The squadron sergeant major, he hated you walking on his lawns, and when I got back to the barracks, to the lines where we were camped, I cut across the lawn, the last bit of lawn, and he's about 300, 400 metres away down the road at the guard hut, and I can hear him yell out to me, "Sapper Hegarty, get off my lawn." And I walked, what the bloody hell, how did the bloody hell he knew me, And so one of the guys in the line said to me, "Wake up yourself, Hegarty, you're the only black bastard in the unit." And, those sort of things, and shit, you lull yourself into, you don't even think about being black, that's what was funny about it all. And today that story still was carried on when we all meet up with troop reunions and stuff like that. Hey, Hegarty, remember the time so-and-so caught you walking across this lawn? And, shut up, that sort of thing. First of all, I didn't like the Americans. They were too loud. I didn't like the Americans at all. They were loud, and I didn't think they were very good soldiers, in comparison to the Australian Army. You know, that was my own opinion, but but the rough loudness and all that sort of stuff didn't sit well with me. The Vietnamese, we didn't have much to do because they weren't allowed on our camp. We never had Vietnamese wandering around our camp lines at Nui Dat. So I didn't know much about them, unless they were the enemy, and they were dead when we seen them. There were a couple that we came across in conflict, but the general public, I was really apprehensive in a sense, because we used to have a lot of the young bucks hanging around the horseshoe outside the lines, and they were there as I felt that they were there watching our daily operations, and just making note of where and what we were doing out in the field when we were laying the mines, and I didn't trust the little buggers, because they were teenage lads, and they'd be riding their bikes, and saying, being friendly, but I think that they were there to do some spying and seeing what we were actually doing and things like that, and we reported back to the Viet Cong. And so I was once again very, very apprehensive of the local sort of. I didn't trust them at all. I didn't trust them, and that's the way I looked at things. Don't trust them. Yeah, I've had a stack of Indigenous soldiers, and a lot they were my mates too, of course. But what I laughed about is it's another funny story. When this had happened in Malaya, when we were in Malaya, and Corporal Billy Coolbra, who came from Palm Island, black as the ace of spades, Coolbra was, but he was a good soldier. I think he won like the military medal, or one of those sort of things. I don't know exactly which one it was now, but Billy passed. He's passed now, but Billy marched into our unit up in Singapore. And on his first day there, I was in the orderly room and I heard the officer in charge yell out to our squadron Sergeant Major, who's that? The local hanging around the queue store. Bill was just marched in, and he was getting all his gear and stuff like that. And he looked like a local Indian bloke, and he had the colour of the same as an Indian, and he had the dark skin and like a Tamil, and I shouldn't be saying that, but he had a dark complexion, and he's black as the ace of spades, put it that way. And Cobra was hanging around this queue store, and because we had a lot of local Indians there working on base where we were situated, and the old officer, the major, yelled out and asked who he was, and of course the old squadron sergeant major says, "Oh, excuse me, sir, that happens to be Lance Corporal Cobra. He's just marching into the squadron." And they thought he was a local. The officer in charge thought he was a local, and Cobra. Another story about Billy and poor bugger. We used to do these every now and again for troop enjoyment, whatever, build up a good rapport amongst the troops, our troop. We'd have things like road rallies, and you had to go through a number of checkpoints on this map that they gave you to proceed with, and because them days in Singapore, most of our guys bought cars, and they were on base. Although they lived off base, they used to drive in their own cars into work, into the unit, and we're just in, the officer in charge to build up a rapport amongst themselves, amongst the diggers. They have these road rallies and stuff like that. And of course, Coolborough said to me, "Oh, hey brother, can you come and be my navigator on the road trip?" Oh yeah, no worries. But went to the first checkpoint, yeah, we made that one okay. The second one, yeah. The third one, we go along and say, "Hey, bud, guess what we got to do? I got to get some petrol. I'm running out of petrol. How much money you got on you?" I said, "Coolborough, you lazy mongrel, I'll send you back to Palm Island. You know you're going on a road run, what's the name, rally, and you should have filled the bloody car up with petrol before you got out." Oh, those sort of things. But yeah, a lot of good army mates, and a lot of them were Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander fellas. We're still good mates now. And of course, we all get along in the tooth, and some of them passed. But yeah, it's good to have those reunions, troop reunions, which is great. Well, coming back from Vietnam and back to Australia, it was bloody awful because of you can sense that there was an attitude there from the general public that sort of despised us as diggers. It was prevalent in the RSL, where we weren't allowed more or less to join because of our service in Vietnam, and those marches that were in Sydney, which I was never a part of. I never took part in any of them, unfortunately. That really was upsetting too, because I felt that we'd gone and fought for this country, and we had conscripts who had gone and served this country well, and they were looked upon and with disdain. They didn't ask to go; they were sent, and to be treated like that from the general public in Australia, it was just so bloody bad. And to be, it took me a long time to even join the RSL. Even when I came back, and many years down, I wouldn't have nothing to do with the RSL, because I felt that the RSL should have been there to support us, like they did for the World War I and World War II diggers, and the Korean fellows. But with us, they just treated us like garbage, and it was terrible. We didn't ask to go; we were sent there. That was the government's decision, and yet the people took it out on us. The public took it out on us, which is sad, and it's a blight on Australian history. We say that I always say we got an Aboriginal history in this country. We also got a history about the way the Vietnam vets were treated by this country, and they should be ashamed of themselves for what they did. Yeah, I would have liked to join into that one. I thought it would have did a lot of repairing feelings and stuff like that. I think it was timely, it was needed, and I just sorry I couldn't participate in it because I was so far away. I would have liked to have been there with it, and I think it was a healing process, but it's still it was just a gesture that which was needed in a sense, but it didn't heal the old wounds, what was created in the first instance. PTSD, yeah, I love it. Yeah, I had trouble sleeping, problems with all that sort of thing. Wake up with during the night with horrible things, thoughts, and going through your mind. It's taken a while. Vet Affairs now, they've been bloody good in helping us to get treatment and help along the way. And yes, I'm over it now. But for the first 10 years, I think I suffered really badly with PTSD. Trust was hard to, put in people. There was a lot of things that sleepless nights, waking up and coming back to sleep and things like that, with the horror minds going through you, seeing your mates get blown up on minefields and standing on mines and stuff like that, and picking up the pieces afterwards, you know. It's just, it all went through your mind. And yeah, it was a traumatic time. It's a very traumatic time, but I'm over it. I'm over it now, basically. My family was very proud of me because of that. I never sort of, you know, mentioned that when we made contact with our mob back up in Townsville, there seemed to be a tradition within our family that we were military, serving in the military. I had cousins up there, first cousins, who I had never met before, then found out that they'd served in up at PNG, and one of my uncles had even been in World War One, and he was my Uncle Valentine. And I didn't find this out till we made contact with our family back up there. So we had some history, a lot of history in relation to the military. And yeah, and my family's been always proud of me and for the service that I did for my country. My service actually allowed me to make contact and re-establish our values with my traditional group, family group up there in North Queensland, and learn about my history. And whilst we knew that we came from North Queensland, but we didn't know the specific areas. And I'm still involved up there today in establishment of our traditional ownership. Actually, I had a role to play with the Army because of my Army services, where one of the where our land that was given back to us, there was old Army establishments, and we had to liaise with the Army, and I was used as the main contact person because of my Army experience and working with them. And currently we're going to on Magnetic Island, there's old bunkers up there, and we've got to. I've got to go back up there because of my military history. I've got to go up there and liaise with the Department of Defence and in preserving those particular bunkers for historical, as because they're historical sites, as well as ours. They're on our country, which is on our land. So, yeah, and that, because of my background and my military background, I'm now looked upon by my people that I would be the first contact for anything to do with defence. We've got our own memorial out here now. I come over here every year with Eric and all of us. We have our own service here, and we're joined by the Mergen RSL. And it's an annual event which we have a parade at 8 o'clock every Anzac Day, and then we go into Mergen and celebrate with them as well. The Anzac Day with those guys. And yeah, and now when I first came home, as I said, I was very, very cheesed off, pissed off with the RSLs, and I didn't want anything to do with Anzac Day. It took me years and years and years to overcome that because of the treatment that our vets, the Vietnam vets, that was aimed against them when we first came home. But it took me a long time to get over it. And yes, it's okay now. It's fine. Before I got out of the Army, I did as many courses as I could. I was back. I spent more time at school in military engineering. I did clerk courses, stores courses, or everything that could sort of transferable job skills that I could take with me when I left the Army. So I didn't want to leave the Army. I didn't really want to leave the Army, but when I got that public service job, I thought I'd apply for it as a welfare liaison officer. And I got that, that was my first job back, and it was back on country up in Townsville. But the Army stood me in good stead. They gave me all that, my training, the skills that were transferable back to Civvy Street, the job skills that I obtained whilst in the Army. So whilst I spent a fair bit of time back, like after Singapore and Malaya, at the School of Military Engineering, but I did it because I wanted to get those skills, and I ended up being a corporal pay rep, and that was good. Oh, I've got to tell you about another funny story which pertains to an Aboriginal person from Cherbourg here, which is Claude. Claude just came back from, and I was the corporal pay rep at the 7th Field Squadron in Nogra, and we got Claudia and a number of, well, actually 100 of them were sent back, and they were sent to 7th Field Squadron at Inogra, and they were from 17 construction over at Vietnam. So Vietnam had closed down. They all came back to Inogra, and they were sent to our squadron. So we had 100 new personnel come into our squadron, and they all had to be sent on leave. So before they go on leave, they got to be paid. So I'm the corporal pay rep, and so I'm doing all these pay books up and everything. So giving all these fellas their pays to go on leave and whatever. And it comes to Claude Malone from Cherbourg. Guess what? His pay book's missing. They lost it in transit, and I overlooked the whole fact that I didn't realise that Claude couldn't get paid until the end, when everyone else was paid, and then there's this one little black fella stand up there without his pay to go on leave. Oh, Claude, what can I do for you, mate? No, I went to see the officer in charge. We got him paid, and we sent him on but God, he was abusing me there for one side. Fancy, I come from Cherbourg like you mongrel, and yeah, this is what you did. I said, hey, I didn't lose your pay book. You're the one who lost it in transit somewhere. Anyhow, we got him paid, but poor old Claude, well, yeah, those are the sort of things make you still laugh about, and we still joke about today, Claude and I. If they're finding it difficult to get jobs and employment and stuff like that, my recommendation is the best thing to do is join the services. The army will give you the best grounding in life, and then give you the skills to transfer on and live a good life, and be able to establish yourself and give you that particular training, and you'll find that you'll get friendship and lifelong friendships that last a lifetime. And the services can never be overlooked as a means to utilize to better yourself. And for young people today, I would like to see a lot more. I sometimes always say to myself, I think conscription would be good for our mob, and just to give them 12 months in the training and give them the opportunity to see what kind of life they could have by joining the army or RAF or navy or whatever. It's a good life. It's a good life, and I recommend it to any young person, girls or boys. That's the way to go if they are looking for any ambitions in the future. I just want to be remembered that as a member of that particular family who went to war, remember that I fought for this country, that I served my country. That's all I want to be remembered as. Just he was a soldier. He went away and fought for his country and for us, and came back from there not too. What would you say? Injured or harmed or, mentally, that was a different sort of thing. But it's just, I just want to remember that I fought for my country and for them as well. The Army, the Navy, the Air Force is such a good life, and it's important that our young people take advantage of those opportunities that may exist within those services. It's imperative that these stories be retained for future generations, to show that we're part of this country. this is our country and we served our country.